Yeah, recording on audio now?
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So what's the future in terms of like what are the different types of recycling that we should have here?
Look, we want to stick with the 3-bin model. We don't want to keep on adding bins because bins continue to add collection, space, storage issues, particularly with units and apartments, which are already a nightmare if you've lived in a unit, as I have in recent years, and you've got 3 bins. There's no room for anything else. Victoria are adding a 4th glass bin. That is completely outrageous. We want to get better at sorting. We want better technologies. And we want to look at the container deposit scheme, potentially expanding that onto other products like wine bottles. Now, we don't have an official policy on that, but there's movement to look at that in a serious way.
Telling me we're going to get more for the wine bottles if we take them to...
We get nothing at the moment.
Wow.
There's no 10 cents on wine bottles. So that's something we were looking at. But you've got to do that very carefully, bringing the wine industry with you. The reason it was never on wine bottles was that wine bottles weren't litter. The container deposit scheme was set up in South Australia in the late 1970s. First in Australia. Victoria will catch up next year. 45 years later, they don't have one at all. But it was a litter reduction scheme. It's the reason South Australia is the cleanest state in the nation. Today, it's not about litter because we don't tend to litter nearly as much culturally. What it's about is what they call the circular economy, making sure a wine bottle becomes a wine bottle, becomes a wine bottle, becomes a wine bottle.
Yeah,
if you put a wine bottle into the yellow bin, which is quite appropriate at the moment, and it breaks, it becomes usually road base. So it goes into building roads. That's not the circular economy. That's one use replacing another, and it's being reused once. We're not interested in that in the future. We want true circularity.
So how do you facilitate that? Because wouldn't you have to have more organisation methods to have different products actually having that kind of life cycle?
So let's look at wine bottles, for instance. Everyone's got wine bottles. Everyone loves the idea of this, apart from potentially the wine industry, because everyone thinks they drink lots of wine and will be rich if you get 10 cents per wine bottle back. So, there's that incentive there. But people, let's look at wine bottles. Wine bottles can be quite easily recycled if they had 10 cents on them and they went to the depot rather than into the recycle bin. So you take them to the depot, the glass is sorted at depot, it goes, in the case of South Australia, it would probably end up at a massive shed up just out of Gawler at a site, a private company called Aurora. Currently, Aurora produce 2 million glass bottles a day.
Oh my God!
People thought I was going to say a week or a month. A day. It is the biggest glass manufacturing facility, I think, in Australia. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is. Because, of course, South Australia produces 60% of the nation's wine. And because of that, we have a much greater need for wine bottles. And we have a much greater need for recycling. Recycled, there's a huge hunger for recycled glass content, a huge customer demand as customers are demanding more sustainability in industry, in the wine industry. But you've got to take the wine industry on the journey. The wine industry is having a very difficult time. Tariffs in China, some challenges in the UK with alcohol taxes that are coming in, labour shortages, cost of wages going up. The last thing you want to whack them with is the administration around this, because it's quite administratively burdensome. But if we work hand in hand with the wine industry over several years, we can get 10 cents on those bottles. But it, like all of these things, is a big process. It would have to be done in a bipartisan way. Of course, I'm no longer the Environment Minister. I'm the Shadow Environment Minister. But I would certainly support the current government to move in that direction.
Are you pretty active in your environmental minister role as the shadow?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you become the leader, you get to pick the portfolios. That's my job. That's my luxury. So I gave the shadow environment portfolio to the person that I thought would be most passionate about it in this state, and that was me. Because I loved being the Environment Minister in South Australia. I believe we transformed the portfolio, got so much done for our parks, for wildlife, for beaches, for single-use plastic pollution reduction. We did so much, and I wanted to maintain that momentum. I stood for politics to become the Environment Minister. I achieved that and never set out to be the opposition leader or the Premier, but I'm on a new trajectory now.
Will, you got a question?
Well, that leads into the next part of the question is, how much of it's a surprise to you now that you're in this position of being the opposition leader?
it's a huge surprise. I'm a boy from Hallett Cove. My parents moved to South Australia 19 years ago when I was in high school to give their 3 boys greater opportunity in life. Never for 1 minute did they think that greater opportunity would see one of their 3 boys become the state's opposition leader, and potentially the premier in the future, because I'm running to win in 2026. I'm 1 election away from being the state's premier. I don't know if I'll get there, but I am running to win. I hope I get there. I hope the South Australian people see the vision and passion I have for this state. But it is a big surprise on a couple of levels. I didn't expect we'd necessarily lose the election. You know, the election loss, I thought it would be closer than it was. I thought there was a chance we could lose, but we lost heavily and badly.
Yeah.
And horrendously. We had a terrible campaign, a shameful campaign, an embarrassing campaign. Many people should be looking very carefully at that, and will look very carefully at that, why that happened, me included. But I woke up the day after the election and realised, you know, there was an opportunity to become the leader, that if I put my hand up, I'd certainly be the favourite to take that position, just the way the dominoes had fallen on election night. However, I took several weeks to make that decision, talking to friends and family, what I wanted. You know, I tossed up, do I just stay as a backbench MP and get better at my surfing down at Middleton, or do I, and that went through my head, let me tell you, or do I throw everything at it, become the leader of the party? As I said, if I put my hand up, I was 95% sure I would get the endorsement of my colleagues, but the decision I had to make was whether to put my hand up or not, and put myself forward as the alternative premier of the state of South Australia.
Love it.
Amazing.
Love it. You're so good at talking now.
I don't know.
Oh no, you've gone big. You've got so much flow about it. It's great.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
You were good before, but like you just, you know, you definitely reached another level in terms of your, just storytelling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's all part of it. You've got to be able to bring people on a journey. And if I look back 8 years ago, if you go back 8 years, I had just entered Parliament, just been sworn in as a backbench MP, and I thought I was out of my depth then. You know, I think many people in leadership have what they call imposter syndrome, which is the idea of or the feeling that, how did I get here? I'm not worthy of this. I can't do this. And I listen to podcasts of people in senior international leadership positions. You know, some of the most powerful people in the world have that. And I certainly do. I think, how did I end up as the leader of the opposition? Especially because it wasn't planned. Some people, and I'd put Premier Malinauskas in this camp, have set out on a journey to become the Premier of South Australia.
For a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah.
And have seen it as their destiny. Now, I'm not saying Peter Malinauskas sees it necessarily as his destiny, and he's worked exceptionally hard to get there. There's no doubt about that. But I didn't. I was extremely satisfied as the State's Minister for Environment and Water for 4 years. And look, I hoped to, I'll be very honest, and I've been reasonably public about this, I hoped to become the State Treasurer had we won. And I had conversations with Stephen Marshall about that.
Why'd you want to be that?
Because the person with the money can affect real change, and there were particular things that I thought I could apply money towards, including the natural environment in the state, an area often starved from money. We did very well, historically well, over 4 years, but I felt we could take that to the next level. Thought we could apply a lot more money to innovation and skills in this state to really transform the state, and further transform it from the 4 years of transformation that we saw under Stephen Marshall. So that's why I wanted to be the Treasurer. I always think, put a Scotsman in charge of your money, they'll do well.
Yeah, nice and frugal, I feel you.
That's exactly
That's Hamish, the fellow Scotsman.
Oh, legit, my dad, he's been starting to realise just how frugal I am. And he just shakes his head at me and goes, how?
That's my son. That's my son.
No, he's frugal, but I'm like beating him at being it. It's funny. Because I work with my dad now, so it's cool. And all right, so what is your actual journey of your experience of yourself? Like, you've come from a whole other country, and now you're a leader in this country. Like, what is that like for you?
It's unbelievable. Look, my parents brought me here at the end of 2002. Just wound up high school in Scotland. Mum and Dad came out a few months before. I remember so clearly the day I landed in Adelaide Airport, the 30th of November 2002, which is St Andrew's Day, in fact, the National Day of Scotland. But I landed here at Adelaide Airport. I remember the blue sky. I remember the drive from the airport to Hallett Cove, and seeing where we were going to live. The house wasn't ready. My mum and dad built a house there back when one of the subdivisions at Hallett Cove was opening up. And I can remember so clearly driving into that street. At the end of each election campaign, I door knock that street. So my 3 election campaigns, I've gone and door knocked that street. I've got photographs of me in that street, 2014, 2018, 2022. And this place became home. But it wasn't easy. I wasn't excited about moving to Australia by any means. That was my mum and dad's dream. Like so many migrants, it is their parents drive them and make that happen. I came with mum and dad. I didn't want it, and I pushed back big time. It was a nightmare for a while, a teenage nightmare. But I eventually knuckled down and thought, I'm going to make a shot of life here, and I did. And that then triggered a journey of involvement in community, surf lifesaving, environmental work, then on to council, deputy mayor of Marion, local MP, shadow minister, and now leader of the opposition. I've condensed 18 years into minutes, but it is very far removed from the wet but green landscape that I grew up in the southwest coast of Scotland. I'm still very connected to that community.
What's your community called?
So the region, the ancient region, because Scotland has its shires and regions and districts and things like that. The ancient district is the district of Galloway. So it is hill country, rugged hills, forests, sloping down to fertile plains by the sea. So the areas around the sea, highly fertile dairy and arable farming country, then into forested country and up into mountains. So it's in the south part of Scotland. And in fact, the closest city was not in Scotland. So people have always heard of Glasgow and Edinburgh. Our closest city in Scotland was Glasgow, but in fact, the closest city was Belfast in Northern Ireland, and that's where we would go and do our shopping. We'd get in the ferry. It was about 35 kilometres away.
Wow. There you go. And where is that in relation to Loch Fyne? Because that's where my family resides.
Yeah, I'd have to Google Loch Fyne.
Don't worry about it.
That's embarrassing. But Loch Fyne sounds small to me.
Yeah, I think it is.
Look, it's probably, most of the lochs are up in the north.
Well, it's definitely on the west coast.
Northwest?
It's like it's a bit under, like a few hours under Isle of Skye.
Yeah, okay. So it would be between Glasgow and the Highlands, and we're south of Glasgow.
Yeah, okay.
We were about two and a bit hours south of Glasgow.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, in terms, because I love the conversation about how things recycled, different supply chains. Like I really geek out on it. In terms of like the difference between cardboard. How good is cardboard
Swivel.
as being a like recycled material? Is it the kind of just breaks down and then it's made into cardboard again?
Okay, so cardboard is interesting because if you can put cardboard into your green bin as long as it's not got staples and tape on it and things like that. And the green bin recipients actually quite like cardboard going in there because it helps some of their processes. So there's a tip. For young players, you can put cardboard in your green bin, and also importantly, pizza boxes as well, which should go in your green bin because almost always in your green bin with pizza boxes. Yep, almost always. So there's another recycling tip.
The pizza can go in there tonight,
right?
If you've got leftover pizza and you don't want to eat it, into the green bin, because any food can go in the green bin, but your pizza boxes will almost certainly be contaminated with oils and the grease of pizza, so they just no-brainer straight into the green bin. Cardboard is very easy to recycle, so it's the sort of thing that can circulate round and round and round again, either via the composting process if it is very clean, but also just through the paper pulping process.
Yeah, bet. Okay, so Adelaide's city skyline and whatnot. What are your thoughts of what the future would that be like? Because I've seen on the east side there's been more developments with like apartment buildings and stuff like that, which is obviously a new thing. And then we also have Glenelg that has the sky rises, centre of the city, but we've also seen it on the west side starting to come up, but not heaps. Like, how do you think that will...
I love seeing Adelaide grow. So I'm from down south. I'm a boy from the south. I often think of driving down South Road at O'Halloran Hill. You come through Glenthorne National Park and you can see the city in the distance. And that city is dramatically changing, especially the southern view, because it's widening. Because from the south, you can see both the east and the west start to expand. But particularly east, you're looking at, I think it's the Relum, and there's another... hotel / apartment block there as well, and those are two of the highest buildings in the CBD. So that new one in the furthest east area, I think it's either on Frome or Pulteney.
Yeah, it's
that's now the tallest building in Adelaide.
Adelaidean, right? That one?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's called.
Yeah, it's the Adelaidean.
But that's a big change to the skyline. We're seeing investment. There's a range of different buildings proposed. There's a great building going in on King William Street. It's not particularly tall, but it's got huge bulk. I think it might actually be the bulkiest and possibly the largest office building in terms of floor space.
Oh, is that the one
King William Street,
right next to Rundle Mall?
Yeah, it used to be the City Central Arcade. The Southern Cross Arcade. City Central's still there on Rundle Mall between Rundle and Grenfell. So the Southern Cross Arcade fronted King William Street, and it's being built there between there and James Place. That's a new building going in. And actually, listeners, if you're down on King William Street, look at that building site, because the facade of an old building is there. That was one of the things I did when I was Heritage Minister, which came with the environment portfolio. I actually saved that facade and gave it...
the slither?
Yeah. So that's the Sands and McDougall building's facade. And the developer wasn't stoked when I made that decision. But they are now encapsulating part of Adelaide's heritage in the building. That'll be really exciting to see when it's done. But so that's a new building there. Look, I'm in favour of seeing... I'm someone who thinks this city can grow, as long as growth is planned and there's appropriate infrastructure, appropriate greening as well, which I'm passionate about, urban greening. But I think a lot more people can and should live in our CBD, and I'm talking thousands more, if not tens of thousands more. I think Adelaide's CBD can absorb far more people, contribute to the vibrancy of the city, spending through the city in terms of people using cafes and restaurants, and everything from retirement accommodations to student accommodation to everything in between. Our CBD can take a lot more people. I think there's more prospects of areas around Glenelg, around Marion. I think there's lots of opportunity for this city to grow.
Yeah, because we had about 30% commercial vacancy before COVID hit. I mean, just on a commercial front, we can fit more people.
We certainly can. A lot of our commercial vacancy, though, is older stock, and businesses are and workers are increasingly demanding of their bosses a higher quality office fit out and experience, more modern, more environmentally friendly. So a lot of the office vacancy rate in Adelaide is old stock.
Yeah, it's like C and D,
which may never get filled again.
Yeah, well, I mean, that will come down to developing the next generation of buildings, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And making sure things like green walls, green roofs, you've got real innovation in the type of building in your building design. I think if property developers don't embrace that sort of stuff, people won't come back into those sort of buildings.
Yeah, fair point. Will, did you have a question before?
About sustainability and climate change. So obviously last time we talked to you, we crowned you the environmental champion Adelaide Set.
I've still got that.
You remember that?
I've still got that trophy. I moved house a few months ago, and it was on top of the microwave. Now it's sitting in my spare desk in the garage. So
we've been relegated.
I love that.
We've been relegated to the shed.
No, but it hasn't gone in the bin. I would have felt bad putting it in the bin.
What's happening with that building? So I remember it was a staged situation. What is the ALP going to do? Are they going to continue it on?
So the single-use plastic bill, yeah, you're exactly right. So the sort of headline-grabbing stuff, became law on the 1st of March 2021. That's when we got rid of plastic straws, drink stirrers and plastic cutlery, and that got first place in Australia to do it. But of course, as you mentioned, we'd built in a range of tranches of that ban, and also very easy capacity, so that things without big legal changes, you could actually bring in other items to quite easily ban through the process of regulation, which is a much easier type of legislation.
Cool. What was it like working with George?
George.
Yeah,
George was my social media guy back when I was the last year or so of my time as Environment Minister. George did a great job. There wasn't, when I went into opposition, you've got a lot less resources in opposition, so you've got to really curtail your operation. And
George, you didn't make the cut.
no, don't say that about poor old George.
Cut that one in. Cut that.
You'll have to cut that. George did a great job, and I miss him. But we had to go down to a much tighter workforce when you go into opposition. You don't have the resources and the capacity that come with being a government minister. Although the leader of the opposition gets a bit more than some of his or her colleagues, of course.
What would you say for his future employers? What do you reckon?
Employ him.
Employ him. There we go.
George was really creative, always trying to do things differently and push the boundaries. I didn't expect to get questions tonight about George, though.
Ah, look, we keep
How's
it candid.
George doing? I haven't heard from him
He's
lately.
good, man.
Yeah?
He's good. Yeah, he's
I
killing
saw
it.
a photo shoot with him and his girlfriend on Instagram today.
Oh, dude, you're about to see some wild photos from that shit. He bought a sword.
Okay.
He bought a sword because he's going through this, like, you know how he...
A sword
He always has new
We all go
things.
through a
that he's
sword
like-
stage.
The fat of the month. The fat
Yeah,
of the
he's
month.
new fat of the month. He loves swords right now. He's
Okay.
like, to be a man, you must have a sword.
Okay. Well,
And he's
that's an
likes that.
interesting thing to subscribe to. Stay safe, George.
Quick
Don't go on
intermission.
the bus with it.
Well, or down Rundle Mall.
Quick intermission, guys. But the keys to the car.
Oh, the keys of the car?
Yep.
Oh, they're on my hip.
Because we have pizza coming.
We got pizza coming.
That's exciting.
Oh, dude, why do you need the car, though?
Because you locked the front door.
Everything was locked.
Wait, the person locked it.
Yeah.
That wasn't me. That was
Yep.
somebody else that was here. It's pretty good that people, like, lock this place up for us. Like, I love it. I actually really like it. Oh, by the way, so, yeah, we're uncut. That's the difference here, is we're completely uncut. We have the ability to do it how we want. So we just take bits, put it on social media, and the whole cut
Good.
up, we just put it on so people can listen to a candid, real conversation.
Love it.
I'm
Yeah.
waiting for the camera to come back because then I'll start getting more political.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so in terms of like how it has been adjusting to being the guy that's supposed to know everything about everything in South Australia, what's that been like?
That's hard. That's hard. So when you're Minister for Environment, deep knowledge. Single-use plastic, climate change, national parks, rangers, coasts, plants, animals, animal welfare, all of that stuff, but a very deep knowledge. And water, of course, River Murray and those sorts of things. But then, and I've been in cabinet for 4 years, so you're hearing from the Transport Minister, the Health Minister, the Child Protection Minister, the Sports Minister, etc., the Treasurer. You're hearing from these people. And I've been in various cabinet committees where you are exposed to their thinking and their ideas and what they're advancing. But suddenly, as opposition leader, your knowledge goes from really deep to really broad and probably inevitably shallower. So I'm still the shadow environment minister, so I've kept the deep knowledge of the environment because that's, as I said earlier, a passion of mine. But now I've got to go across everything. I've got to... we've had a very difficult piece of legislation presented to State Parliament in the past week on return to work, which is the work cover insurance scheme that's state administered. Hard intellectually, hard work, hard to get that right balance between the rights of vulnerable workers and making sure they're protected and not putting something that's too burdensome on business that they can't pay their levies and they go bankrupt. So hard stuff. And I knew nothing about work cover apart from the basics before this past week. So you've got to quickly get your head around it. And there's so many things like that.
How do you do that?
You just got to... I've got a team of advisors around me. I read lots, I listen. I've got shadow ministers, of course. Their job is to get the deep knowledge and then pass that knowledge to me. So it's very tricky.
But how do you make sure it's like a right decision that you're making? Because they obviously come to you to go, hey, is it kind of like, is it work as a business? Like, is it cool if I do this? Like, this is what I think.
Look,
this is what I reckon.
Stage,
and you go, yeah, that sounds good.
I'm 50 days into the leadership, 55 days, something like that. It is early days. But at this stage, having just lost government, our job is actually to sit back, work out what the Liberal Party's all about, formulate over time policy information, policy ideas, all that sort of stuff. We're not out there with big ideas for the future of the state now. We are rebuilding, refocusing, examining our values, listening to South Australians, working out what we want. So there's lots of engagement, lots of regional trips, and there will be for a couple of years. And bit by bit, through listening to experts, academics, people with real life experience, people on the ground all across our state, we will bit by bit, with my shadow ministers taking the lead for their particular portfolios, come up with an alternative, detailed, and hopefully very exciting vision for our state.
Yeah, that's cool. So you figure out like what it is that is important at this time in South Australia's history to focus on.
Yes, definitely. And there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to focus on. And we're at a crossroads in so many ways. Now, I'm not trashing the legacy of the Liberal government. I think history will be kind to Stephen Marshall and his period as the leader of this state and the work that he and his cabinet did. So I've got to build on the successes of our government. Things like Lot 14, that incredible innovation precinct on North Terrace, where you've got the National Space Agency, you've got cyber security and cyber advancement at the very heart of the work there. You've got some of the most innovative startups in the nation. So we've got to build on that. We've got to build on the success I had with the environmental portfolio and the opening up of reservoirs and the growth of tourism, particularly regional tourism. We've got to build on things, but we've also got to reflect on what went wrong, what was difficult as a government, what people didn't like, what people didn't want. And we've got to build up that alternative vision. It's a huge job. We've got 4 years to do it, but quite quickly we need to start talking about our ambition for the state, the direction we want the state to head in, and where to from here.
Yeah, fair enough. That is a big thing. Will?
Do you think the Liberals are having a little bit of an existential crisis at the moment after the 2 election losses?
Look, you could say that, but I don't think so. I think there's certainly a number of crossroads here, but at the end of the day, we're a centre-right party. Labour are a centre-left party. We're a centre-right party. I'm not going to lurch around from right to left wing from an ideological sense. My job's to modernise the party, grow its membership, grow its level of connection with communities, and right across the state, as I mentioned, every corner of this state ought to be able to feel represented by their Liberal Party, their alternative government, and we go from there.
So
what do you think
broad church is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
You're going to be centre-right.
We're a centre-right party. There's no doubt about that. We're not going to disappear from that. If you don't want a centre-right party, you vote for Labour or the Greens. If you want a centre-right party, you vote for us. But we're sensible centre. We're middle of the road in many ways. But we talk a lot about common sense, supporting small business, providing opportunities for the individual and or communities to get ahead, a hand up rather than a handout. And those are the sort of things that, I threw out a lot of slogans there in some ways. We need to develop what that actually means in reality.
Yep.
And we're not going to do it overnight because that's not my job. My job is to reform, renew, reinvigorate this party and bit by bit build it into an alternative government for the state, given that it has just been monumentally kicked to the curb by the South Australian people. We have to look at every aspect of how we do business.
How's that playing out for you, topically right now? Obviously, you've got the by-election in Bragg. You have wanted to get the COP to Adelaide. You've written to Albanese. And obviously, you've been pretty critical of the budget for the ALP. So how does that... how do those values and things been playing out for you in the first 55 or so days?
So 55 days, very, very early. But look, I have been confronted with a whole range of different challenges and immense opportunities for the party. So my leadership is a complete generational reset, line in the sand. The dynasties of bygone era are out the door. And let me tell you, I am quite happy about that. And I've always said that. we need to move beyond factional infighting, crap that happened before I was even born. I just have got no interest in it. I've got no interest in the old grudges. Take them with you. This is a party for all South Australians. It's being led by a bloke who wasn't born here. It's being led by a bloke from the southern suburbs, and it's being led by someone who for 4 years led the most progressive environmental agenda in this nation. So that's some of the things you'll get from me. You'll get a party that is focused on the suburbs and regional towns. It won't be run by elites. It won't be run by big business. You'll get a party that listens to small and family business, which are the backbone of this nation. A bit of a cliche that's used a lot, but that is the case. So and not only did I keep the environment portfolio, I am the shadow minister for small and family business in South Australia, because we need to reconnect with that sector, a sector which abandoned us.
And what do you think that means?
But in a big way on election day. Again, I've got to take time to work that out. But small business needs a government that keeps out of the way most of the time. It doesn't overregulate it, provides it with support around startup initiatives and advice where appropriate. But most people just want to get on with it with minimal red tape and minimal bureaucracy. Of course, there's still a place for that, but not over the top.
Yeah, fair. What do you think about the land tax that was changed?
Land tax changes, of course, the figures where 92% of people paying land tax paid less. 8% of people were very grumpy because often they paid a lot more. So from an equity point of view, if you're talking to people living out in the suburbs and the regions, actually they're better off because of the land tax. They're better off because the vast majority of them who are paying land tax are paying less, and they're better off because there's more money in the government coffers from that last 8% to spend in hospitals and roads and schools and the environment. So look, I was in a cabinet that backed the land tax reform. I'm not going to walk away from that, but it's certainly the way it was administered, the way that process was taken forward by the then Treasurer was hugely criticised by some of our traditional supporters. I'm not going to reverse the land tax decision. It's here to stay. Labour are committed to it. But I need to get out there and talk to these people and hopefully bring them back to the fold if they did in fact abandon us on election day.
Yeah, because one thing that interests me about the land tax thing is that it's always based on like if you were earning like the maximum potential that property could have rather than like what it actually kind of is generating, you know, because there's a property that could generate with a different business model more than another business model, and they always treat it like a bigger business
upper
model.
echelon.
Yeah, they always treat it like more. So it's
look, land tax is based on the obviously the value of the land on which the property sits on. So you could be doing nothing with that land. You could be doing all sorts of business activities on it, but it's the land that you are using to do your business, to run your rental property or your service station, or and look, it had a disproportionate impact on 8% of land taxpayers. I come back to the fact 92% of people are better off, but it got people offside. Again, I have to put a line in the sand and say, I'm here to talk to all South Australians and work out what they want from their alternative government. We should always be looking for ways to reduce the burden of taxation, in my view, as a Liberal, as a whole across South Australia. And boy, did we do that when we were in government. Massive reductions to the emergency services levy, massive reductions to payroll tax. As water minister, I reduced water bills more than any minister in the state's history. $200 for the average household per year less, about $1,400 for the average business. That's big changes.
Yeah,
so we did significantly reduce cost of living and cost of doing business for South Australians while we were in power. My job's actually to make sure that doesn't creep up under Labor and to hold them account for that, because I will be very surprised if it doesn't creep up.
Fair. And what's it been like navigating in a society that gets triggered more than ever and like civil discourse has slowed down?
We live in an outrage society.
Exactly.
People want to be outraged too often. I see that all the time in social media. I can't go on Facebook anymore. I still use Instagram because it appears to still be a fairly friendly platform, so I still do interact a little bit on there. But I can't go anywhere near Twitter, which is a vile sewer of destruction and hate, and politicians who are purveyors of that, and I'm not going to name them, but they probably know who they are. They should be ashamed of themselves. Anyone can go on Twitter. They can pretend to be anyone, and they can just create destruction. They can attack people in the most personal ways. They can destroy people's mental health, and they can push people to suicide. Twitter is a hateful mechanism, which I would love to see wiped off the face of the globe. Really,
what do you think about your boy Elon Musk? Getting ownership of it,
well,
and
Elon
wanting
Musk
to change
isn't my
things.
boy, but look. I don't really have a particular view on that. My point is social media is a sewer, and it ought to be. I think social media ought to be more regulated.
In what ways?
Well, I think the platform should be responsible for some of the statements that are made on there. Increasingly, I think we'll see governments across the world really crack down on them, because it's not. Look, some people argue Elon Musk, free speech. Yeah, but is free speech? It's not like writing a letter to the editor of a newspaper. You've got to be careful it doesn't defame people. It's never going to be published if it's overtly offensive, racist, nasty, etc. Social media, you can create a false profile and you just attack. You can create a real profile and just attack. Animal welfare advocates are amongst the worst and most how should I describe them? They're the most. They lack any level of balance, and I've talked about this as environment minister. I was horrendously abused by animal welfare activists. Let me tell you a story. Beginning of March 2020. COVID started then, but my story's not about COVID. I was overseas in my brother's wedding. I was overseas when COVID took off, and at the same time, a fairly junior administrative officer within the Department for Environment issued a permit to cull 80 wombats in an Aboriginal owned piece of land on the York Peninsula. Those wombats were causing serious damage. They were overabundant. They were eating themselves out of house and home, and they were destroying the productivity of the land. It was a farm. The department said that you could the Aboriginal Corporation could cull 80 wombats. But we're talking there's thousands of wombats across that landscape. It was an animal management technique. We live in a human-altered landscape. Things get out of whack. Sometimes we have to kill things. We kill tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of kangaroos every year. Sorry, folks. I know people are listening to that and thinking, wow, that is landscape management. Often we do it for environmental reasons. And it's not just kangaroos. I could read you a long list. Sometimes I thought of myself as the minister for allowing things to be killed. Anyway, let's go back to March 2020. The department issued this permit, and somehow it got public. I don't know. Someone told someone who told someone who told someone who told an animal welfare advocate. I'm being kind calling these people advocates. They're not. It's all about self. It's not about the animals. It's about self-promotion, self-purpose, and it becomes their being. Their lack of discernment saw them sweep onto my social media platforms at an international level because they are so passionate, but misplaced passion, evil passion, I would go as far as saying. This is organisations like PETA, the Animal Justice Party, the Greens here in South Australia from time to time. I've got friends in the Greens in South Australia, but the Greens encouraged this. They were apologists for what then happened. What happened was that tens of thousands of people attacked my social media, tens of thousands of people from right across the world. They swept through like a tsunami of hate through my platforms. They saw that I was tagged at a local cafe a few weeks before, they swept through the local cafe's platforms.
Wow.
They then they spread faster than COVID. They then managed to infiltrate my brother's platforms and his new wife's platforms. They posted things like, "We hope that your wedding was ruined by the corpses of wombats hanging from the hall."
Wow.
In small town South Carolina. I might add, some weren't many dead wombats over there. I'll take one next time I go. But this is what these people are like. They animal welfare, animal justice advocates, and they believe in something that is worth believing in. Looking after animals, caring for animals, but they place the rights of animals well above the rights of people. And as the state's environment minister at the time, many, many, many levels removed from the person who signed off on that destruction permit for wombats, I was attacked from every angle. I've done significant media on this. I did an extended interview on ABC radio with the presenter at the time, Ali Clark, about this, about the vile levels of attack, the death threats that came from animal welfare activists. It was a very low point. I had to. The only way I could stop it was shutting down my social media.
Yeah.
The hate, the death threats, the attacks on my family, the attacks on coffee shops where I'd had coffee because they said that the coffee shop was an apologist for wombat killers. These people, they're hate-filled people.
Yeah.
And that was where I saw it manifest most dramatically as environment minister. But you see that all the time. On social media, attacking people for their race, their position in society, the geographical area that they live in. They find a reason and they sweep in, attacking people for their politics.
It's that consequentialism, the ends justified by the means. That's the problem of how they think, because they think it's, as long as they achieve their moral position of animal welfare, they can do whatever it takes to achieve that. And that is, I think, the biggest difference on a philosophical level between the left and the right is that we believe in that. So.
These people are from the left. The outrage is from the left, and they feel so powerfully motivated and justified that they're doing the right thing. Now, as I say, animal welfare is an important issue, and we should want animal welfare to be advanced. As I was the minister responsible for it. But what we don't want is this for these platforms to become places where hate is exercised in a way that people are unaccountable. And I don't want anyone to think it's just animal welfare activists. I used one example to play out how hateful social media could be and how I'd felt it with death threats to my family, the wombat in the hall in South Carolina. Like, come on. But it plays out in a political sense all the time. And it's not just the far left either. It's the far right as well to an extent. Sure. Yeah. But it's the retreat of society to more extreme positions, perpetuated by the echo chamber that is social media, because you only hear what you want to hear. The algorithms that stack this whole thing up ensure that you're getting one source of news, one set of opinions, one set of viewpoints, and then that emphasizes your feelings. It emphasizes to you that you are right because you're not hearing alternative viewpoints, and this is where this problem sets in. Look, I'm in favor of more regulation for social media. I absolutely am, because I've been a victim of the most horrendous trolling.
The federal government talked about it. Morrison talked about it late in the campaign. He brought up social media. I think it may have been at one of the town halls. Clearly he has been a victim of that echo chamber of extremes. It's not my job, and everything taken out of context. Do you think that's been one of the hardest things for Liberals to deal with? Is this kind of constant attack on people on conservative basis?
Look, I think the left is more strident and more organised on social media. There's no doubt about that. But people involved in politics, to an extent, have to have a thick skin and have to just roll with it. And I'm the opposition leader now. I'm not going to go off in a corner and cry if someone's mean to me in social media. However, and this is the big however, I would hate to be in high school in 2022 because definitely. I don't know how I could survive high school in 2022 with the hate and the awfulness which is perpetuated on social media. And I worry so much for our school kids in a social media age, because social media arrived on the scene when I was at uni. So just a few years when I was out of high school. So I just missed the social media era. I worry so much about kids' mental health, kids' suicide rates. My heart actually aches for what our current generation of kids has to endure and may have to endure in the future as this sort of thing ramps up.
And COVID as well as another level of, of
pressure.
Of pressure and depression and stuff like that. Yeah, there's no doubt.
I do really worry about mental health. Look, I think amongst everyone, I think we do have serious mental health challenges in our society today, and how we respond to that and how we resource that and how we skill people up to be able to deal with it at a personal level and have more resilience, but also to be able to treat it at a medical level as well. But I think the onslaught that our young people face from particularly faceless social media entities, and obviously that perfect Instagram world where everyone has a six-pack and if they're a bloke and, looks amazing.
Peter Malinowski apparently does.
Well, we haven't seen it lately. He's had 3 months as Premier. He might not have the same time to go to the gym as he wants.
No.
But you know what I mean. I just think social media presents such challenges. I think it's one of the great challenges for modern society.
Definitely. Well, it's just changed the whole social dynamic of how we even communicate. Technology, period, like texting.
Yeah, absolutely.
People don't pick up the phone anymore. It's weird. Like, you're in the dating scene trying to call like girls. They don't like calls. Like,
no one likes calls. I don't like calls.
No, yeah.
I like calls.
Hamish doesn't like texting.
I love calls.
No, I love texting.
I love
Hamish
being given
kept
the phone.
on calling me
I
to
know,
see if I
You
was
always
coming
text
tonight.
Hamish
And I'm
Speirs.
like, just text me. Because I've always
what
got
the reporters do, they text, all right?
Well, my iPad's connected to my text, so I can just type them back real quick while I'm doing it. And people
You
think,
have definitely been the better person to speak to in trying to arrange tonight.
yeah, okay, then my staff. Just come direct to me, but my staff don't really love that, to be honest. Look, I'm a texter.
Yeah,
I would
fair.
send in the... well, maybe not, wouldn't go as far as thousands, but I'd send many, many hundreds of texts a day.
Yeah,
Many
that's fair enough.
hundreds of texts.
You'd have a lot of phone calls as well, surely.
Yeah, that's one thing that's stepped up since becoming the leader. The number of phone calls and the amount of time I spend on the phone, managing all sorts of issues, doing way more media, but phone call after phone call after phone call. I'm just like, stop.
How do you deal with like lobbyists? People that like want to get close to like be persuasive.
I've never had a great deal of problem with that. I've always sort of kept my distance from most lobbyists. But there's a lobbyist register here, and it's not the MP or the minister who has to disclose. It's the other way around. The lobbyist has to disclose that they've met with someone. So, look, as Environment Minister, I didn't get a lot of lobbying at all. There were obviously things along the way, but it wasn't a common thing.
Yeah.
There's appropriate ways to meet them, but you've got to be just really sensible and careful about that. It's a justified part of the political process when carefully considered and measured.
Yeah, fair. Okay, so in terms of social media, what kind of regulation do you think that we will see as a world in how we're going? Because to me, it looks like we're heading to more centralization of like one world movements, starting with medicine being a huge one, with the World Economic Forum like being able to shut down places now. And we agreed to that, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, that we agreed to kind of forego our right of choice of how we go about the next pandemic. But I think, have you heard that?
I'm not on top of that, no. So I can't comment on the World Health rules.
It looks like we're going more in a centralization world.
I think we definitely are.
And then there's obviously good and bad side of that. But with social media, what kind of regulation do you think that we will actually manifest, and how do you think they'll get in the way of like a free speech?
This is difficult because I'm a passionate believer in free speech, but I'm not a believer in trolling, in bullying, in senseless and faceless attacks. So I think there needs to be a balance struck there. I'm not sure if it's around people having to prove their identity on these platforms. There's nothing to stop me setting up Joe Blogs 1984 at hotmail.com and setting up a Facebook page.
Look out for that Joe Blogs.
Dodgy
that
Joe
was
Blogs,
such a good double entendre.
Yeah.
Joe Blow, 1984. This man.
1984.
It's been listening to Kendrick.
George Orwell, hey.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to stop me doing that and then setting up a Twitter account, a Facebook account, an Instagram account, and then just trawling and being awful. It's a little bit harder on Facebook because you do have to sort of have a critical mass of friends, I think, to be legitimate.
I feel like that side is definitely well agreed on around the world.
Verification.
All platforms are kind of like, we are trying to get on top of bots.
Yeah.
They keep coming and they keep deleting. And I feel like that's a part of social media.
Bots. I'm not a bot if I, fake an email account and a photograph and go trawling around the place and attacking.
Yeah, so just anonymity.
Which, by the way, I don't do. I don't have time to troll.
I think it should be like opening up a bank account. I think that's the kind of level of
So that's a big step up. That's a big step up.
Yeah.
And of course, that's very onerous to do. And the administrative side of that would then maybe cost money.
because you could look at like an Instagram profile, for all of us here, that's our business in a lot of ways. Like that's good.
Yeah.
I think if you're running it as a business, then the verification stuff needs to be much more sharp.
But they do it with trading accounts pretty effectively, like online trading accounts. You have to do the photo of yourself.
Yep.
You have to have it next to your driver's
And you have
license.
to do it for the authenticated accounts with the blue ticks and things like that. You've got to be legitimate. And
what is that process like? You got a blue tick?
Yeah, I've got blue tick.
What's the process
hey, everyone,
like,
I've
man?
got a blue tick.
How'd you get the blue tick?
I felt so fulfilled that. Got a blue tick. Hey, mom, I've got a blue tick. I've made it.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
How'd you get it?
There's an authentication process, so you've got to prove who you are and demonstrate why you deserve a blue tick. But it's not over the top, but it was much easier to get it. I can't believe we're talking about this. Much easier to get it on Instagram, on Facebook than Instagram. Instagram was trickier.
In what way? Like, what did you have?
It took longer and
was it
needed
just
more
a form?
authentication.
Did you just apply a form or did you have them come to you?
Well, Facebook just appeared one day. I'm like, I've got a blue tick.
Oh, but that is a lot easier.
That didn't happen until I became a minister.
Okay, and what? Somebody just knew
I don't know
from...
if someone in the Facebook world did that.
But Instagram, you had to apply for it?
There was some sort of authentication process, which required ID, I think.
And you just had
This was a few years ago.
Staff did it or you did it? Or?
It was a combination. It was a joint effort.
Yeah, that's cool.
It is, but it sounds a bit indulgent, a bit of a first world thing. I can't get my blue tick.
Oh, hell yeah. But look, let's be happy with
the blue
first
tick
world.
is quite important, by the way.
We haven't got a blue tick.
The blue tick is quite important so that there aren't fake profiles of you.
Yeah, you're verified.
It is a verification. So it is part of that protection that is slightly built in for people at a certain level, because you don't want fake David Speirs going around and, again, trolling Peter Malinowskis, hate your six-pack.
That'd be pretty funny, though.
Who hates anyone's six-pack? Want your six-pack.
And I was reading an interesting article about that particular topic, is that an agency called Simple did Malinowskis's election campaign, right? They did all the marketing for a year. And they said that the moment that they took that photo, the algorithm went bonkers. Like that's when they think when the election went from being, like close to a lot more kind of trending towards the Labor Party way. And it was based on their marketing photo. Yeah.
Yes, well, that's
is sad.
Very sad.
Very sad.
It's very sad.
But he may have won quite a lot.
You'll know where I'll be between now and the next election, in the gym.
Yeah, well, you are. I mean, I remember we went back ages ago. We had conversations about that. I remember vividly of you doing these massive box jumps of a PT.
Yeah. Look, I'm not gonna, rate my fitness level, but I'm not unfit.
He's
so
fit.
You're like
he's
a
fit
7,
to run. He's fit to run.
I'm. Look, I'm not going to be rating myself against Peter Malinowskis, but you have to remember he's 5 years older than me. So, look, the next election he might be might. But if you look back on photos of him in the past, he wasn't always as fit as he was now. So, like, good on him. Good on him, I think, because I do think I place a premium on health and fitness. I think it is so important to keep mentally sharp, and physical fitness is an important part of that. And so I do say good on him for actually setting an example, because there's not enough leaders that do that. And I think I do work very hard on health and fitness. I eat healthily. I do lots of outdoor exercise. I paddleboard. I get into the water whenever I can, and I
Paddleboarding? Like stand-up paddleboarding?
Yeah, stand-up paddleboarding. I paddleboard lots.
You surf a lot?
I used to. I did surf lifesaving for years.
How long's your board?
How long's my paddleboard?
Or your surfboard?
Nah, I don't have one at the moment.
But how long? What did you surf? Longboard, shortboard, 6 foot?
Sort of in between board. Nah, 6 foot's too short for me. So probably
6'2",
a little bit
6'4",
a little bit bigger. Yeah, 6'4".
That's ideal for Middleton. That's a good
Well, that's where I go. Middleton's my place of choice because Middleton has very consistent surf. And so, well, Middleton's got everything. So you've got at the point where you can actually do some pretty serious surfing, or you can have those consistent low waves that you can just practice your technique on. So Middleton is a very, I think, a very user-friendly surf beach, because you can get up your skills in those lower waves, and then when you want to go out the back or over to the point, you can get better, and you can challenge yourself. Look, you wouldn't catch me at Waipinga or at some of those beaches.
What about Parsons? You might be able to do Parsons.
I don't know. I got dumped at Boomers years ago.
We do nights in Boomer.
Probably when I was about 20, 21, and I really that put me off for quite a long time. Look, I spent a fair bit of time, well, certainly as environment minister, out on the west coast, the west coast of the Eyre Peninsula, and that is, I look out there and I see people surfing waves that are coming straight off the Southern Ocean, and I'd be dead in a second. I'd be crushed
waves.
like a grape.
Streaky Bay,
Streaky Bay, Elliston, to Cactus. There's some. I love watching it. I love the ocean.
And you were out there recently.
Yeah, I was
that way.
Yeah, that's a great part of the state. I'm doing lots of regional trips at the moment, but I love
that.
I love that section between Ceduna and Port Lincoln. Breathtaking coastline. There's sea eagles, there's ospreys, which is a type of sea eagle that I love. I actually chair the Friends of Osprey in South Australia. I've got to chair a meeting of that later this evening, which is a conservation group, but that coast is wild. There's nothing between that coast. That's the beginning of this Great Australian Bight, and there's nothing between there and Antarctica. That is a breathtaking part of the state.
That's some fair.
There's so many South Australians that haven't been over there. It's quite it's devastating.
I've never been there.
Well, it's far away.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's just bloody far away.
It's just the distance, and it's the economics of it as well. To get there.
It's getting more popular. There's a lot more, and I would say if you are going over there, please tread lightly, because people do take 4-wheel drives and drive over the beaches and sand dunes and are causing chaos over there. That's happened a lot since COVID. But it is a absolutely stunning part of our state. Very few people, a handful of percent of South Australians have probably spent any time over there, but I could retire over there.
Furthest I've been of South Australia is Port Lincoln.
Okay, so you're not far off.
No, I'm not far, and I loved Port Lincoln.
You're talking an hour and you're up to Elliston, an hour and a half.
Yeah, I never went there. That sounds
I've been to Cactus. That was great.
Cactus is beyond
Ceduna. Yeah.
Now that is just one of the best trips I ever did. I went caving as environment minister in Nullarbor National Park.
But what do you mean caving?
Under cave.
But did you have abseil roping down caves?
Yep. Oh, that's wild.
Dude, that's
a little bit. Helmets and all that sort of stuff, squeezing through little holes. We had one we had to squeeze through, and we couldn't take the ranger with us because he couldn't fit through. Look, we've got some incredible places in the States.
I did that in Budapest with George, and George at that time was pretty tubby, and he couldn't get through this. He couldn't get through this spot, and it was the funniest thing. He got through, but it was a wiggle, and I was there racing the instructor, because I was 10 kilos less than I am now, so I was super skinny, and it was fun.
For George, we had to leave this ranger behind, and that was at Nullarbor National Park in the Nullarbor Wilderness Area, and that's the national park that runs to the edge of the state. That, and seeing the Bunda Cliffs that form part of the landscape over
Bunda
there.
Cliffs.
So the Bunda, Bunda, the Bunda Cliffs are the longest line of sea cliffs in the world, and they are in South Australia.
Wow.
They run from the Western Australian border 200k in to South
And
Australia.
they're like limestone cliffs.
Well, I'm not a geologist. I'm not sure what they are.
George
we
would
need
know.
you here.
George would know.
They're cliffs, and they're massive cliffs, and the waves are just
Like 20
rolling
meters?
in. Head of Bites there.
Like 20 meters high kind of cliff? Like, what do you reckon?
No, we've seen a photo. We
No,
have some
these
good
are
photos.
massive. These
Yeah,
are the
yeah.
longest line of unbroken sea cliffs in the
Like,
world.
how high are they,
And
do you
they're here.
reckon?
Well, they're higher than 20 meters.
Oh, so they're huge.
Yeah, they're big. These are serious cliffs.
It's like it's like a crust and then drop. Like
Oh,
that's-
so
yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen that in
You would've seen
Scotland. I saw
They're
that.
probably in Scotland, but they're not the longest unbroken line in the world.
No, but I
that's
did see
right
it there.
here. And that's where Head of Bite is. That's where the whales come in, the whale nursery. And
Yep.
this is time. August is probably the best time of year to go. That's when I actually went. But August 2020, it is just the best. And that's here. In this
I want to
state.
go. That sounds good.
That has been.
Can you
that's a
drive
good
next
thing.
to it and stuff?
Yeah, you can get pretty close.
Yes, sick.
You,
Yeah,
you
that's
can
been a good
drive
thing.
down to it at certain points and then look at it.
Okay, fair.
But it is wild.
Okay,
I
so
love wild.
my boy Will Gilmore would want me to say this. He is a marine biologist, and he's been spending a lot of time over COVID down at Victoria. Oh, not Victoria, down at Victor Harbour.
Victor Harbour, yeah.
With all the he essentially studies whales
Yeah,
and how
okay.
whales use that as their home.
Yeah,
to
their
have the little
nursery.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, the nursery, right? But supposedly there is several ships that will come and try to get close to them all the time, and it keeps scaring them off.
Well, there's rules about that. There's pretty strict rules around interfering with native species and how close you can get to whales. So I'm not sure they're getting scared off. Don't want to. What was his name? Will
Yeah.
Gilmore. So I don't want to diss him, but there's more whales than ever before.
Yeah,
one bit-
There's
it's
not
been
more
growing.
whales since ever before.
There's a particular
since
boat. There's a particular boat that does tours. He's saying that's the problem. They're
Well,
getting,
he should report it to the National Parks and
I think they
Wildlife
have been.
Service. Okay.
there is a discussion.
I don't know
yeah,
whether
there's
they
a
got
discussion
traction
right
yet.
now about
But
it.
the great thing about whales at the moment, whale population is growing. And obviously whaling ended X number of years ago, I think in the 70s or 80s. And the population is very slow to recover because gestation period is very slow. They're massive species, but they are recovering.
Yeah.
You see whales now at this time of year off Hallett Cove,
Yeah.
Christie's Beach,
Christie's
down in the
Beach.
southern suburbs. But Hallett Cove, I represent Hallett Cove. I'm a very proud Hallett Cove boy, as I keep on saying. And to see whales there, that's recovery. That's conservation recovery, and that's a great thing. If you give the natural environment a helping hand, it helps itself pretty quickly.
Yeah. I like the boardwalk you did down there.
Yep, there's some pretty good things down there.
Christie's Beach is good for a surf every now and then as
It
well.
is nice, yeah. And so is Hallett Cove. I haven't surfed at Hallett Cove. Too many rocks, but some of the better surfers will surf down there.
Yeah.
How do you find that most people are, given that we have this outrage culture in person? Because you're obviously going around in person to heaps of
Most
people.
people are fine in person.
Everybody's pretty chill.
Occasionally, if I don't block someone for outrage on social media where they call me terrible names, sometimes I'll say, have a coffee. Talk to me about it.
Yeah.
People they usually just go away.
Yeah, fair.
But when I do, it's very easy to have a conversation, and a rational one. But this again is the great failing of social media. They're behind a screen. They're hidden.
Yeah.
They can say whatever they want.
So in terms of giving people some nuggets of gold that are young and wanting to level up in life and, rise to positions like you're in, what kind of pieces of advice would you have for how to navigate your career that have been really good for you? How to navigate the business world, how to navigate the political world?
It's all about relationships, building relationships with people. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the smartest guy in cabinet or shadow cabinet, but you build relationships over time, and relationships are your currency in many ways. And over nearly 20 years in Australia since arriving here as a kid, I have built just a multitude of relationships, not intentionally actually, but bit by bit over time. I've not always been in Adelaide since that time, so that obviously helps. and bit by bit, piece by piece, you build those relationships. You allow people to rely on you. You do people favors. You help people out. You provide people with support, and you ask people to join you on the journey as well. So relationships really, really important. I think truth's really important. So I call it out. That sometimes gets me in trouble, but I tend to be very straight talking and just say it as it is. Try not to be offensive in that, but I think people really appreciate truth, because with truth comes certainty. People know what you're on about. You're not hiding things. You're not dancing around the issue. You're being straight to the point and focused on what you're after, what you're about. And so truth is incredibly important to me, and has been a way that I've been able to advance. And I think invest in your interpersonal skills and your communication skills.
What are some good ways to do that?
Well, look, public speaking is critical. You're not going to get... I just think almost everyone who has achieved significant things in politics and leadership, in business, can communicate, both in writing, which I do think is very important, but also up front, in front of a crowd, on a stage, over a video presentation. You got to invest in the tools of your trade. And leadership, the biggest, I mentioned relationships, and then communication, another big thing. You've got to invest in your communication skills. You've got to be able to stand up the front and sell a message, bring people on a journey. Whether you go to a public speaking club, I did that while I was at uni, went to an organisation called Rostrum for a period. I'm still loosely associated with that organisation. I don't have time to go anymore. And it feels a bit awkward. It seems a bit lame to some people potentially, but you've got to invest in the tools of your trade.
What things have you learnt in developing your communication that have made a real difference?
Practice. It's all practice. I stand up there in Parliament now and speak in a way that I could only have dreamt of speaking it in 8 years ago, but it is practice. Everything's practice. Preparation before giving a speech. I gave a speech the other day that I was really unhappy with. I largely had to read it because I didn't have time to practice beforehand. I didn't have time to develop that speech myself. It was written for me largely. And I went back to my staff and said, no, never again. We actually need to work out a way to give me space when I've got to give a serious speech to develop it up myself, maybe with the help of staff and people providing an input. Absolutely. But we have to find me space to do that. So practice preparation.
Or do you have full passages?
Vast majority of the time I dot point, or even less. Just keywords and things like that. But the one that I did the other day where I was in a rush, I didn't have time to practice. I'd had a big weekend of events and was unable to sit down and spend 2 or 3 hours just crafting a speech. Now, sometimes it's good to craft the speech word for word and then reduce it to dot points. And I won't say it word for word like it was written when I reduce it to dot points, and I will not articulate it in maybe the way that I did if it had been written down. But I think there's a genuineness and a level of focus around saying what you actually mean and want to say when it's coming off the top of your head at a moment of time.
So it's
from
not
the heart.
academic
but
or something.
It all takes time, practice, and preparation.
Hey, Will,
There's
could
no
you
quick
put
fixes.
the heater on again,
Yeah, sure.
please? Thank you.
There are no quick fixes, and there are no get-rich-quick schemes. There's no way to run the marathon and, somehow circumvent the full circuit and get to the finish line without going the whole way around. That's one thing I learned. Unless you happen to buy a lottery ticket, there's no scheme to get you to the huge wealth or to the top of the leadership pack. You just got to work and keep pushing on.
Just be consistent.
Consistency.
Yeah.
That's presumably how Peter Malinowski's got his six pack.
Yeah.
And good
It's
on
the
him.
same formula.
thanks.
Good on him.
Same formula.
Everything's consistency. You just
Yeah.
got to be consistent.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I've got all the answers. I come and go in terms of consistency.
Yeah, I mean, you're human, right? And then, okay, so what time do you get up? What time
At
do you...
6 o'clock.
6 a.m. You
Not always.
awake or...
Yeah, I'm awake at 6.
And then what time do you get started with like life? Do you have some things that you do
look,
first?
I try to have a bit of ritual in the morning. I try to get between 7 and 7:30 down to my favourite coffee shop on Jetty Road, Brighton. It's called Cream. Shout out to Cream. And it stands for Coffee Rules Everything Around Me.
Oh,
And
that's good.
I try to get down there. I don't get down there quite as much now. I'm the leader of the opposition, but I try to get down there, do my emails, clear my head. Sometimes I do lots of emails. Sometimes I do very few. Always send a Snapchat to keep my streaks alive. Massive Snapchat user. I've just panned social media. I've just panned social media.
I love that.
But so Snapchat, let me tell you a little story about the good that social media can do. So I grew up on a farm in Scotland, family farm, grandparents, cousins there, really tight with my cousins, loved them. Like they were like brothers and sisters to me. Moved to Australia and left them. And we grew apart. And we stayed loosely in contact, the odd Facebook message when Facebook became a thing, catch up with them when I went back. 2019 was back there, August 2019, sitting at the dining room table. One of my cousins, they all work in the farm still, and one of my cousins pulls out his phone and gets a little Snapchat notification. I'm like, do you have Snapchat? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, me too. We added each other. Last week, all my cousins and my aunt, we all tipped 1,000-day streaks. And for 1,000 days, we've swapped pictures every 24 hours. And that has brought my family closer together than we have been for 20 years. And so I have just spent a large part of this conversation panning social media. But through COVID, through a serious and terminal family illness, which is not going to necessarily won't have a happy ending for one of my family members, through the birth of my second cousin, who I have not met yet because he was born during COVID, through the seasons of Scotland, Christmas Day, through the goose that flies back to my family farm every year and lays a nest of eggs on the top of the hedge. You know, I've seen that year on year. And 1,000-day streak and going strong with my cousins Andrew, well, not Andrew, he's the one that doesn't do it, Jonathan, David, he's got the same name as me, and Rachel, and my Aunt Margaret.
That's beautiful.
And our family's closer together because of it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's why I got into social media. I went away to New York on an exchange for university, and I was like, how am I going to share about my journey? I started with WhatsApp, and it just didn't really click to be like, oh, let me upload photos and stuff to here, because it just didn't work well for me. And then I found Instagram. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I upload photos, and then I have like really, really long captions and tell the stories about what I'm doing. And I just learnt from all this personal development courses I've been doing about this thing called Vivid Share technology. So it's a way of sharing that's like really detailed and present, and you know, it's a first person like narration, like it feels like you're reading a book. So I'd write in that style, and then I really like writing lyrics and music, so it like played in with that passion of mine, and
So you look, as I say, there is a place where social media goes horribly wrong and becomes a cancer in society. But I just gave an anecdote where it can be a really great thing. And so one of my morning rituals is to make sure I send my snap streak. And like I mentioned several that are over 1,000 now, but I've got 2 that are just touching 4 years with a couple of mates. So, you know, snap streak is lasting 4 years. And let me tell you, if we lost those snap streaks, we would be gutted. No. We would be absolutely gutted. But it's amazing when you send that and some pictures are boring, obviously. You know, the ceiling of Parliament House or my same long black coffee at Cream. But there'll be certain messages, certain Snapchats that we send, especially the ones from overseas, which prompt out, what's that? And both ways, they'll send something and I'll send, and what's that? And then you'll have a conversation. And, you know, they were waiting for their Snapchat on the day I became the opposition leader. They stayed up till the vote got counted. Actually, it was probably just a message, but they were there on Snapchat. They said, we're not going to bed until we know this result. Now, if it hadn't been for Snapchat reconnecting us 3 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. And I was just saying to my cousin this morning or yesterday that we will, I'll be there in 5 weeks' time and we'll take a snap together again.
That's cute.
So, yeah.
So I've been doing a bit of research at the moment of like what it means to be a man and reading books and stuff about that. I want to get your thoughts on, from your life so far. What does it mean to be a man to you?
Oh, gee, that's a big question.
Wow.
That's a question that could get some
Kings.
politician in a lot of trouble.
What is a man, definitionally?
No, not like that, but just like, what does it mean to be a man?
Yeah.
That is a very hard question. Not something I've ever really put a lot of thought into. I suppose it's different for a different person. But look, I strongly believe in contribution to society, contribution to community, and whether that's at leadership or at a leadership level or at a different level, contributing something is part of being in my view. So leaving a legacy, and it doesn't need to be a new national park or a skyscraper you built in Adelaide, but leaving a legacy in relationships, in family, and in a tree that you planted. In something like that, I think that's part of being, and perhaps for me that's part of what it is to be a man. That is not a conversation, and not a topic that I've delved particularly deeply.
You don't think at times you think to yourself, maybe I've got to balance, my kind of macho responses and more of a caring feminine responses to things going on around you as a leader. Sometimes you might want to go in the opposition, you might go attack dog, and that's that masculine kind of thing. Other times you're dealing with colleagues or maybe even dealing with the other side of politics, and you have to be kind of going into that more caring approach or bipartisan approach.
Oh, definitely. So, as I said earlier, to get things done, you've got to have relationships. You've got to be able to build those connections. And I don't know if that's leaning more into the feminine side or the feminine, as people say. I don't know. That is not something I have had time to self-evaluate, I suppose.
How do you put your foot down in terms of in like a workplace culture and like do it respectfully? Yeah. How have you navigated that? Because
been hard.
Disagreements or like ways that you would be you're being treated by someone or you're treating someone. Like, how have you navigated conflict in a workplace scenario?
Gee. Conflict is very difficult. Conflict. Some people are good. I was about to say some people are good at managing conflict. I think very few people are. I think a lot of people either blow up at conflict or put their head in the sand. I think you've got to try to build relationships where you can have truthful, honest, detailed conversations with people and be really clear about expectations from the beginning. So having established a shadow cabinet in the last 50 odd days, I am trying to build expectations into my team, so it can be a culture of expectation, a culture of delivery, a culture of achievement together. But that is that's not easy.
Yeah. So what kind of expectations
do I have of my team?
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm still setting those because can't set those to on day one. I don't believe you can in some respects, but you've got to work up your values, work up what you want to achieve together. Now, what do we want to achieve? We want to win the election in 4 years' time. That's what we want to achieve.
Simple goal.
But there's a lot of nuanced layers of things that we need to achieve to get to that point. We need good policy development. We need good connection with the South Australian community. We need good campaigning skills. I need my shadow ministers to have the skills of communication, the skills of stakeholder engagement and management, community engagement. So that's all the stuff we're working on now, so that then we can talk about our ambition for the state and then we can pitch this alternative vision. But you're not going to get any new policies from the David Speirs Liberal team 50 days in, because we've got a lot of work to do. Our party has been shattered with a catastrophic election result. Let's not...
Yeah, why do you think you lost?
Let's not face that. So let's not deny that, and let's face the reality of it and build from it. Why did we lose? I've been very public about this. We ran a very bad campaign.
What about it do you think
it had no narrative. It had no underpinning narrative. We didn't talk about it wasn't at all inspiring. I wasn't inspired by it. We neither talked about what we achieved in government, and let's face it, we kept South Australia safe, one of the safest places in the world, and our COVID outcomes were second to none across the globe, pretty much, give or take perhaps one or two places. But We didn't sell that message. We didn't own that. We didn't celebrate that. We didn't celebrate the economy thriving. We didn't sell projects in a coherent way. And we also didn't talk about the future. You know, we didn't talk about why bother re-electing us. And, you know, Stephen Marshall, one of my friends, mentors, I think that guy is a great leader. But something went wrong in the coherency of the election campaign. We didn't communicate. We went straight with the South Australian people. We didn't look them in the eye and say, this is why we should be elected, folks. Get on board with us. They got on board with us in 2018 to an extent. We got across the line. We were broadly popular through the term. Stephen Marshall was broadly popular going into election day. But people turned up in those polling booths and voted against us en masse. We lost all our marginal seats, but then some. I'm the only Liberal down south.
Yeah.
All my... And I hold a seat that should have been one of the first to be swept away. My seat should have been swept away demographically.
Marginally.
First.
Yeah.
But I held pretty strong, took a bit of a haircut in my margin, but compared to those around me, I stood firm because of engagement, because people in my community knew, 1, I had their back, 2, what I stood for, 3, what I had delivered them, and 4, what I was going to deliver them. And some of my colleagues at an individual level didn't do that well, and they know who they are, and they're not there anymore. And but the central strategy didn't work either.
Do you think, I think some commentators have said at times that, you know, Stephen and the party ran it very much as in that time as a business operation, and the politic was maybe put to the side, and that Malinowskis played very, very strong politics, you know, in terms of aspiring campaign, when to hit, when not to hit. Do you think that...
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think Stephen's approach was like a chief executive, general manager, solid, performance-focused, pretty good government overall. Now, people will criticise certain aspects of his government, the government I was part of, absolutely. But I think we ran a reasonably steady ship in very difficult times, global pandemic, etc. But we didn't do politics well. Good at governing, bad at politics. You know, I'd say that.
Do you think that's for you? There's an agenda of trying to bring some of these conservative independents back into the fold.
I'll work on that. I've got great relationships with all of them, every single one of them.
Yeah. I
will reach across the party and across the parliament. I've got a good relationship with Peter Malinowskis. Yeah. You know, I don't have a relationship with all his cabinet. I don't come across them. I don't need to have a relationship on a working level. But I think Peter Malinowskis and I, if we weren't facing off against each other, we'd probably be friends in many ways, because I think we've got similar motivations, and you know, I'm not going to criticize him at a personal level. I'll criticize aspects of his budget, aspects of his government. I'll criticize underperformance. You've got some pretty underperforming ministers, I can say that straight up. But
who are they?
I'm not going to
call
name
them out
here. Oh, well, look. I'll say it in Parliament, so why wouldn't I say it here? Look, I think we've seen some disappointing performance from Nat Cook, the Human Services Minister.
Yep.
There's no doubt about that. But there's others, and we'll see over time. It's early days, and they actually deserve the opportunity to have a crack at running the state. They won. They won. Peter Malinowskis, was it on his acceptance speech? He said, "We're not enemies, we're adversaries."
Yeah.
And look, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. I don't want to hate him. I don't hate him. I don't hate Labour. My background's far more Labour than Peter Malinowskis's. His is far more Liberal than mine.
What do you mean?
Well, his demographic background, where he went to school, where he grew up, his pathway in life.
Yeah, okay.
My pathway in life. Much more traditional Labour, his much more traditional Liberal. I think many people have observed that. Many commentators have observed that.
Strong union movement in Scotland.
Yes, there's been there have been Scottish politicians in Australia.
And they're generally a Labour Party.
And they have not been on my side of politics, that's for sure. But look, he's got a mandate from the South Australian people. Labor have that. So that makes my job a little bit difficult at first, because you gotta let them have a crack at delivering that mandate, but still holding them to account, casting an alternative vision, telling South Australians who David Speirs is and what I would do differently to lead this state. It's a balancing act. I don't want to be out there whinging and whining every single day.
Fair.
Yeah.
How do you think we went in terms of, like, as a nation and as a state with COVID and measures and whatnot? Because, like, in relation to personal freedoms and what that means, because we,
Look,
had a lot of control.
I think we got the balance right. South Australia, if you take pretty much as an average of restrictions across the main pandemic, had the least, and we had incredible outcomes with death rates. It's sad to see anyone die of anything. 4 people died between the start of that pandemic and the 23rd of November 2021 when we opened up this state, and there's obviously been several hundred since then. But by that time, vaccinations had occurred. I was very comfortable with the way this state was managed. We maintained a strong economy, a healthy population, and a relative sense of freedom. Yes, it was difficult. If you wanted to travel overseas, if you wanted to get here, if you wanted to cross borders, if you certain professions, first responders, people working in hospitals, nursing homes, schools, and we got it. We owe them a lot. But compared to, I was sending snaps every day. Snaps being exchanged between here and the UK. I know where I'd rather be.
I think Dave is right. And obviously, Hamish, we've been very critical of COVID stuff in South Australia, but you can only judge it on the inefficiency of government. At the end of the day, you got to judge it from government to government, because government's not good at something on this range. Like, how do you tell people they have to sit down while they're drinking at a pub? It's not a particularly easy thing to achieve, and other countries, they never got a chance to go to the pub for 2 years.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on, like, vaccine mandates? And they're like...
Vaccine mandates, look, I'd like to see mandates step back bit by bit by bit, and I think they have. When was the last time someone said you had to be triple vaxxed to do anything?
I think it's just the Oval.
Is that the last?
No, the Oval's dropped their
Oval's
vaccine.
dropped it now?
Yeah, there's very little. So,
and then there was shows.
But look at the system. It worked, didn't it? We lift the restrictions, lift the requirements, get the population sorted. COVID's still here. People are still dying every day pretty much. But there's a level of... We got through. We got through compared again to the UK and the US. So I was on a news website the other day, about 3 weeks ago.
As in, like, you were talking on it?
No, I was looking for a piece of news, internet, in the US.
Yeah.
And I wanted to look something up. And I saw this sort of feature article down the bottom, and it said, as the US tips 1 million deaths, we look at the country that did the best. Do you know what country that was? Australia.
Yep.
Well, what news article was that? Like, what publication?
It was New York Times.
New York Times,
New York Times,
I saw the article, yeah.
Yep. We look at the country that did best. That was us.
Well, there you go.
We only had one big bump, and that was obviously when those protests and riots were happening in Melbourne. That was the dark days. You did say one thing recently about the emergency COVID laws that just passed and called it dark age dictatorship.
I did, because I didn't like... So you're stepping back from a emergency declaration in this state, and Peter Malinowski wanted to be a hero on this. I'm Premier, and I were coming out of the emergency declaration. Nicola Speirs and Grant Stevens, who've been the controllers in some way, and really Grant Stevens is the emergency control head of that. Nicola Speirs, key advisor to all of that. They sort of step back. The Premier takes charge, and it becomes part of a subcommittee of cabinet. That was their plan. But what we saw was they just pushed all the laws that were in the emergency declaration or the Emergency Management Act into a public health piece of legislation. So, we wanted, if we are on a journey towards a very different environment in terms of control and mandates, the penalties should step down. So we did not like the penalties. the penalties that were being advocated in this new bill, which mirrored essentially what were in the emergency declaration.
And what were those?
Well, it included jail time.
This was 75,000
Big fines. And jail time. So we said we won't support jail time and we'll step down fines.
Yeah. So how similar is that to what Dan Andrews eventually achieved? Is that a similarity?
I don't know. I don't know what they've achieved over there. But we didn't think jail time was appropriate at this stage of the pandemic.
100% agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, do you think it was ever appropriate to jail people for like leaving their house and stuff?
Look,
like on a fundamental level?
I think it would be a last resort, but we needed people doing the right thing in those early days. You know, we had difficult times. I was overseas, as I mentioned, getting accused of wombat killings in America in early March 2020. When I got back here, the modelling that we were presented with was based on the modelling that had been undertaken for northern Italy, you know, where lots and lots of people were dead.
But I feel like after 6 months, like we could see the difference in the world, that it wasn't based on that anymore.
Well, a lot of it was because we closed the borders. We could have ended up like that. The tightness of the borders made a massive difference, combined with over 18 months or so vaccination rates.
Yeah, but didn't they also find that a lot of it was like skewed because they had such an aging population in terms of the amount of deaths?
There was some of that, but they weren't vaccinated. It went like wildfire. New York, they were piling up people in alleyways behind hospitals. I was in New York a couple of weeks before that. You know, we were very scared.
100%.
And society was 100% very scared.
Agree. I 100% agree for that first 6 months.
Yeah.
100% agree. I think after that 6 months point where more information started to come out and we're seeing that there was other treatments and whatnot that were working around the world, like, what's it called?
Hydroxide.
No. It's monoclonal antibodies was seen to be.
I'm not a medical expert.
Yeah, I know you're not.
Anything about those.
Anyway, it's said to be like the best one. It was a more expensive one, but there was others that were working as well that would have lowered that hospitalization. They even came out with this antidepressant drug that people that are on it would lower their hospitalization of COVID by up to 90% as well. So there was all these different like early treatment measures that were actually showing that hospitalization decline. So my question was, why do we continue to have such like strict measures in terms of how people can go about living their lives instead of just saying, here's alternatives that we can do. If you get it, let's go into like a how you manage it like we have now, but like a year earlier and allowed
just government's always
the world
it's always behind,
do their thing. You know what I mean?
Yes, well, and that's true. A year earlier, you would have let people do their thing and experiment and ask doctors for certain things, but you know,
we're still not doing that though. Like, there's no early treatment guides.
I don't feel. There's a lot of things I'll talk about. Medical treatments for COVID are not a speciality of mine at all, and I just don't feel equipped to comment.
Okay, fair enough.
Here's a good swivel. Here's a good swivel for you, right?
Swivel is.
Here's a good.
I need to eat at some.
We're gonna swivel.
Do you want some pizza?
Do you have pizza?
Yeah, we got pizza. Can you grab some pizza for us?
Thanks.
I last ate on a plane this morning at about 11 o'clock.
We're going to swivel from, so obviously.
Is the camera on? People see me.
He'll see it.
That's all right. We only put it on you when you're talking.
Support local business.
Yeah, but in terms of how we edit it.
Port pizza.
It's only when you're.
Is it good pizza?
I'm not sure. Is it good?
Yeah, it is. Do you want a piece?
I would love a piece. Thank you.
Hamish is a hungry boy.
Yeah,
so, Mr. Opposition Leader, the question I want to ask you, though, is in the federal election, it seemed that COVID didn't really play a big role, and it seemed that once again, climate change was really back on the agenda. The Greens did exceedingly well. I didn't predict it. I don't think many people predicted how many seats they'd pick up. You know, someone who's been in your life, you've been very passionate about climate change, passionate about sustainability of the environment. How do you see that being played out as you as opposition leader now?
Practical stuff.
Yep.
So, I've just spent a day at a bit of a think tank forum in Sydney. I mentioned I was on the plane this morning. Last time I ate. Pizza's quite good. Talking about centre-right ideology's response to conservation and climate change. I'm a passionate conservationist. I wanted to be the environment minister more than anything else. And the conversations that we had, led by David Cameron, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, these conversations looked at how centre-right politicians and political parties, who are often panned for not responding effectively to the big environmental challenges facing us, could actually respond with market solutions, respond with practical outcomes. And that was my approach. I became Environment Minister in March 2018, and I said, the gesture, the virtue signalling, the activism, the poster waving, the people that wanted to save the wombats, you reckon they've been out planting trees?
I know.
You reckon they've been creating wombat habitat in areas that wombats
they're probably having an hour shower.
They're sitting behind their screens now.
Yeah.
We're not going to generalise. Some of them probably are doing good work. But it's all about practical. When I was minister, more trees in the ground, expanded national parks, Glenthorne National Park down south, more ways for people to sensitively access the environment, expanded ranger workforce, banning single-use plastics, serious measures to impact practical change. This poster waving, virtue signalling activism, I've got no time for that. So 2 weeks ago, state budget was handed down on Thursday. On Tuesday, Labour move a motion. Let's declare a climate emergency. Yep. I moved to an amendment saying, if we're going to do that, let's back it with support for the Environment Department. Let's quarantine the Environment Department in the upcoming state budget from cuts. Tuesday, Labour didn't support that, but the motion got through anyway because Labour got the numbers. On Tuesday, South Australia declares a climate emergency. Wednesday, we announced we're cutting the home battery scheme, a key climate mitigation or emissions mitigation platform of what we're all about. Thursday, the budget hands massive cuts to the Environment Department, including the urban greening practical programs. Tuesday was virtue signalling. Wednesday and Thursday were massive cuts to practical programs. That's the left.
Typical.
The right of politics that I want to be part of will deliver practical outcomes for our environment.
Does this hydrogen plant?
Wait. Chill. Let the man eat his slice.
Hopefully that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
And we'll go into hydrogen shortly. But I want to have a moment where I'm talking, so then you can eat your pizza. Okay?
Okay.
That's okay.
I want my mouth full.
Hopefully, I can make sure that you can even have 2 slices. But please don't say thank you again. Just
bit
keep
greedy
eating.
there, 2 slices.
Dude, he hasn't eaten since this morning. You know,
He's fasting for mental superiority.
No. He likes to eat. Okay, so I had a guy on recently. His name is Ian Plimer. And he essentially is a geologist. He worked in the geology industry when he was young, became a professor all around the world, and then has rejoined the mining industry. He's in like his 70s, and like he's phenomenal. And he's one of the head honchos in his positions now in mining. And he has like something like 12 books out and 150 research papers. Like he's very well researched, and he's a geologist. And he comes from the perspective that all this climate emergency is a bit of a farce when you look at a geological timescale, and that the global warming is actually not happening, in the sense like the actual warming of the climate is not something that is to be alarmed about, because it's happened before many times. And he says it's happened worse than this. We're actually in a really good time. And I asked, okay, what about like the biodiversity and all these animals and insects like going to extinction? And he was saying to me that actually what you find in a higher carbon planet, there's actually a lot more that are being created and not invented, but like there's more species and stuff actually being discovered than there is that are dropping off the face of the earth and dying. And one thing that he pointed to in terms of the science that is used to justify this, the climate change and the global warming was that it's only on like a 150-year timescale, and it doesn't take into consideration underwater volcanoes. And he says there's about, saying like, was it 2,000 above water? You'd probably be able to fact check that maybe. But they're saying like 2,000 above water. And he said there's upwards of 6,000 that we know about under the sea that are not taken into consideration of how they affect the carbon emissions into our society and the methane emissions into our planet. So with that kind of being said, based on what you know with your deep dive into the climate and whatnot, you know, what have you seen is the real gig of what's going on? Like, what's the truth to you of what climate change is and means in the world? You got well done, by the way. You got a slice and a half.
Slice and a half, and then as I'm eating this, I think
piece of change.
This is not the way to emulate Peter Malinowski's six-pack, sitting here munching pizza. Given how little I've eaten today, though, it's probably not making a great difference. Look, as Minister for Climate Change in this state for 4 years, I certainly formed the opinion that the climate is changing. And you could argue the climate is always changing, and of course it is, in a natural sense. But look, I got to rely on the science that I'm presented with, and by and large, the consistent science at an international level, or the scientific thinking, is that man-made, human-generated emissions around energy and agriculture and big source points like that, transport, are significantly contributing to warming of the earth, and that's where I have landed as when I was the environment minister to desire to see action, to see a transition to cleaner fuels, cleaner forms of energy production, and ways to reduce greenhouse gases from agricultural activities, etc. Now, let's say for a moment you don't take my view. Everyone should still jump on board the opportunities from climate change, because our green transition, our move towards hydrogen, our transition to renewables, green industries in South Australia is an incredible economic opportunity.
100% agree.
So the economics outstrip the environmentals. Now, so I say to people who don't believe in climate change, that's not me, but I say to those people, grab hold of the economic opportunity regardless.
Do you want cheaper power bills? Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And interesting, because that's what I asked. I asked Ian this. I was like, Professor Ian, what about the economics? Essentially, I was like saying, isn't it good to be off the grid with your solar homes and stuff like that? Isn't it good to just be sustainable? And he said, look, when it comes to hydrogen, it takes something. It was the number was either 7 or 30. So imagine like building blocks. It takes like 7 or 30 units of energy to create 1 unit of energy from hydrogen. And he said the only reason that is able to actually see the light of day with the current levels of technology we have is because it is subsidized and it is held afloat by the government. That was his thoughts on it. His take on hydrogen was. And then this is a mix between him and a guy named Michael Scherberger or something like that. Anyway, he's running to be the governor of California currently. Very well researched, has heaps of several books out.
I've read some of his stuff.
He's pretty well balanced on things, or tries to be at least. And I think that's an important thing, right? And he was saying that a lot of the solar panels, in terms of our waste management of them, we don't know how to recycle a lot of the materials in them, and then they're ending up in East Africa, and people are just picking through them and getting exposed to dangerous chemicals.
And there may be some of that. That's always been the case with waste, though. We've got to get better at making sure that doesn't happen. We don't have a lot of waste solar panels to date. There wouldn't be many solar panels that have reached the end of their life. It'll start soon.
And do we have a way to solve that in Australia?
I don't know if we do or not.
Yeah, because that's...
but we should be looking for solutions. Hydrogen, look, the great opportunity with hydrogen in South Australia is it is certainly energy intensive to produce. No doubt about that. But the great opportunity here is that we have all those renewables. And those renewables can feed into it. So we've got green hydrogen.
But if they're producing, it's creating, because he was also saying the energy it takes
Can I
to
have
create.
a third piece?
Yeah, of course,
Are you
mate.
sure?
We've got another pizza.
No, I don't know.
I'm not eating anything.
Do you
so
want
can have it all.
some? We have another as well. Do you want
What's the other
margarita?
flavour? Oh, I'll have a piece of margarita.
Owen, please. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm glad you've got like a little waiter.
Oh yeah. Well, look, Owen's my cousin.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
Owen's story?
He's not quite. So, Owen is my cousin. My younger cousin, obviously,
I couldn't tell.
and he works on the cameras.
The production.
Yeah,
Does
he's
he
the
enjoy
production
it?
guy.
Or is he like a slave?
I don't know. Owen, are you a slave? Say the right thing, mate.
Sometimes.
Sometimes you're a slave.
He's just worried about those wombats.
He's probably been trolling me while I've been
One
here.
of the people.
He set up Joe Blogs 1984 and trolling me now. Wombat Warrior at
Wombat warrior. Oh, God, no.
Classic.
You know, Hamish, my thoughts on climate change. You know, at the end of the day, for me, I don't really. The way I see that science has moved when we've had pivotal points and we've changed energy sources, right? It's always been inventions and economics that have driven the change. It hasn't been. This is the first time in society that it's been a big social thing to push something. That's kind of my problem with it, because if you leave it to the economists and you leave it to the inventors, we'll come up with things just like we have with every other thing. Like when we had the hole in the ozone layer from the chemicals in refrigerators and microwaves, we solved it through technology. We go for pragmatic, kind of CEO approach to this thing. We're going to fix this issue in the next 25 years.
What's that guy? What's that guy that said the top 100 things we can do to like make the planet a better place? And his name was like Luxon or something like that. He was.
Peterson talks about him, and so does Milo.
I don't know about that, but I just saw him directly, and he was essentially like, if we're going to impact the climate, the best thing we can do as a world is actually raise people out of poverty, because it's people using using feces, using wood,
Killing,
using all these older
cow poo and
getting
farts.
people-
feces.
Yep.
Yeah, using
One
old
real
school.
challenge is the loss of wild spaces from farming, intensive farming and things like that. So the more people who are lifted out of poverty, you're more likely to live in cities, consolidated footprints, things like that, rather than clearing of land and clearing of forests. Schellenberger talks about this as well.
Coal
And this is one area I really do agree with. There's an opportunity there, big opportunity. Educating women is the best way to do this, because the best way to lift people out of poverty is to educate women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does Owen think of climate change?
I don't know. There's a lot of things going around at the moment. But, I mean, I don't really know, to be honest.
Because I'm really, in terms of the innovation side of things, like I
Fourth
geek
piece
out.
of pizza.
Dude, go ahead. I geek out on this. Like I found this, but mine's more on like on a material and how we can create more circular economy sustainability. For example, like I don't think we should say, we need to get rid of all plastics and stuff. It's like, okay, plastic's a great material to use. How can we, for example, with something like a toothbrush, how can we get that And instead of saying, oh, you need to change your habits of how you use things, say, no, let's actually improve the technology and say, how can we have this convenient, disposable society, but actually do the R&D to create materials that it works to be that way? Because trying to sell someone a less convenient lifestyle is just like, it's silly. Why would the majority of people move in that direction when it's counterproductive to human nature? We're looking for comfortability. Agree. We're looking for how to do things more convenient so then we can focus more of our time on things we want to do. You know, that's why the milkman is gone. Like the milkman.
That's really sad, isn't it?
I mean, it's a pretty cool thing, right? And it would
it's only because the milk's got
We had a
worse.
milkman back in Scotland called Peppy.
Peppy. Peppy.
Oh, no.
Peppy has the milk. Peppy.
Yeah.
And he had a son called Craig, I think. And
That's a bit of a different name to Peppy.
Well, he obviously felt bad about his name. Just called him his son a boring name. What are you going to call your son? Craig.
Peppy and Craig. Anyway, Peppy, when we moved from the village, because I grew up in a little village, but then we actually moved out into a farmhouse in the country. We were really good milk customers. So Peppy would drive it was a couple of K, but he'd come out and still deliver us milk. And
What, a few litres at a time, or?
Yeah, like quite a few. We drank a lot of milk.
That's good.
And he on a Monday he delivered fresh orange juice.
Oh,
That's great.
Anyway, that's the story of Pepe.
Yeah, shout out to
they still do that with water though, which is interesting.
Yeah, they do it with like, you know, boxed water and stuff like that.
Do you think
Shout out Green Hill Springs.
Maybe Pepe does that now.
Yeah, maybe he just does water.
Or maybe he's dead. I don't know.
How old was Pepe?
He wasn't young, but he's not old either. And his kid was at school with me. He was the year above.
Yeah.
I should message my mum.
Yeah.
Find
Snapchat.
out.
Do it.
Snapchat.
Yeah,
Ask if he's not on
get that
business.
streak, man.
Mum's not on Snapchat.
Milk streak.
His surname was Patterson, though.
Pepe Pat.
That's great.
That is too good. That is too good.
That'd be Patterson.
And then Greg Patterson.
Oh, that's it. Wallace and Gromit needs a new name. Pepe Patterson. Oh, fuck. That's good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I found out about
was
this
an
other
aside.
cool thing. That's a good aside. I like that. Shout out to Pepe. I saw this innovation in terms of creating things like concrete, which is they can have these trawlers that sweep the bottom of oceans, and they collect all shells and whatnot.
Precious minerals and stuff like that, isn't it?
Well, just like shells, and precious minerals, and they can actually like take all that and then make it into like concretes and stuff like that, which I thought was pretty cool. And then there's like self-healing concretes, which would be really good for skyscrapers. There's also like the fungi that they can use to create things. There's hemp that they can create bricks and plastics. And
There's a lot of alternatives to plastic now.
Yeah.
Which is good, I think.
yeah.
Plastic shouldn't be seen as an evil thing, though, and I often say this. It is one of the great inventions of humankind. You know, one of our great achievements was the creation of plastic. If you think about it, wrapping food.
Yeah.
Plastic enabled food to be kept fresh in a way that...
Yeah, like
for-
cling
for-
wrap.
Yeah, but vacuum packing and Tupperware and all that sort of stuff. Plastic's not a bad thing, but disposed of poorly, it's a very bad thing. So I think 8 million tons of plastic ends up in the sea every year.
Yeah, but I saw that, did you see that Seaspiracy on Netflix?
Oh, I started to watch it, but then I sort of lost the will with it.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was
There's
essentially
all these
saying that...
Netflix shows, whether you're going to get become a vegan to get a six-pack, Peter, or...
is he a vegan? Is he a vegan?
No.
Oh, thank God.
So Susan Close, the deputy premier, is.
Oh, we
Shout
don't-
out to her.
we don't
Member
like these
for Port
vegans.
Adelaide. We're in her electorate at the moment.
Yeah.
But no, I don't mind vegans. People want to be a vegan, they can be a vegan. I'm not, but whatever. But there's always another fad Netflix show, isn't there?
That's
Jump
true.
on board, and everyone's messaged me. Have you seen what was the vegan one
Cow
called?
conspiracy?
Cowspiracy.
Well, they try to say that these
What's
athletes-
the next spiracy?
Yeah.
I don't know, but this one, the main point that I got out of it was that it was saying that half of the actual plastic waste in the ocean is from the commercial fishing industry.
I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't make a big contribution to it.
Yeah. So that's what they were saying. They were saying if we want to make a big kind of like leap forward in minimizing it, you know, we need to regulate.
I wouldn't be
internationally.
surprised if they're not a major contributor. I wouldn't necessarily believe everything about good old Speirs. How interesting thing though, plastic pollution in along Australia's coastline is dropping quite dramatically. And
Why?
it's because of single-use plastic bans. It's because of people being more aware. It's because of beach cleanups and things like that. It's actually making, in the last decade or so, it's come down about 30%.
Have you? Sorry.
It's
please
coming
finish.
down more.
That's good. Have you seen those companies that have essentially reinvented home products like Zero Co?
No.
Dude, you should check it out. You'd
What
love
do
it.
they do?
It's essentially getting rid of all the waste from your home products. So, for example, your soaps, your shampoos, like all that kind of thing.
So you don't have any wrapping or anything?
Yeah, it gets rid of all of it, but it doesn't take away the convenience of having like liquid soaps and stuff
Yep.
like that. And there's another one,
What's it called? Zero Co.
Zero Co.
Should look at that.
Yeah, I can send you. There's another one called like Blue Land,
Yeah, okay.
and that does a
Send me
lot
the
of
links.
like,
I don't mind those things.
what? Are you shaking your head?
Owen doesn't
Don't
like it.
tell
He hates Blue Land.
No, no.
Right, how
because
dare you?
we were starting a business.
You and Owen.
Yeah, there's essentially
Well done, Owen.
around solving.
Get around it.
Oh, dude, he's
I
a
feel
smart
like I
cookie.
feel like I'm interviewing Owen now.
Do it.
He would be very
Owen.
good. No.
Let's go.
What are you interviewing?
What questions do you
Just
have
needs
for
help
Owen?
getting up early in the
How
morning.
old are you?
I've just turned 20.
20?
Yeah.
Gee, 20-year-olds look young these days.
Yeah. Well, I'm extra young, I suppose.
You're younger than me. What was I doing at 20? Down at Middleton.
Yeah, this man plays in the stock market for fun.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it all going well for you?
Not at the moment. Down a little bit,
Win
but
some, you lose some. What do you
still-
think? What do you think of
Up.
Bitcoin, cryptocurrency?
What?
You're still up.
No, I'm
I'm still
interviewing.
up, yeah.
What do you think of? What do you think of crypto?
It's a tough question. I mean, at the moment it's terrible. But I think when the world stables a little bit,
So should we be buying it now?
I think if you want to buy
Get
it
around
now,
crypto now.
yeah, I think Bitcoin's probably
Bitcoin, it's like 21,000 or something.
You used to be like 85.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at
Money to be
85.
made, but will it ever come back? I don't know.
They reckon $1 million by 2025. So if you buy now, you could be sitting on a fortune.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm quitting politics.
Well,
I'm going
it's,
to go and buy
David
crypto.
Speirs
Well, I'm not saying
investment fund.
I'm not saying invest all your money in it. But
Oh,
I'm saying
okay. I got
$1,
carried away.
$1 million.
No,
I'm saying definitely
I've got
look
another
at it.
question. Where did you go to school? That's a very Adelaide question.
It's
People
so
ask me,
Adelaide,
and
that's
I'm
cool.
like, nah, Scotland, sorry.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in Victor Harbour for most of my life.
Which Victor Harbour, investigator?
In Canada, Lutheran College.
That's what I meant. Yeah, I went to a paddock there when I was the environment minister. I planted
Really?
a tree and saw a bee hotel.
Yeah.
Yep.
a bee hotel.
Yeah,
bee
hotel for
hotel.
little bees. I don't think they work.
And
So
then
you're from Victor?
yeah, I went from Victor. Sorry, originally I was in Adelaide. I went to St Andrews, and then I moved down to Victor.
No. St Andrews.
Do you still live in Victor?
No, I don't still live in Victor.
Why did you leave Victor?
Well, family just moved around, I guess. And now, well, I finished my last 3 years at St Peter's College.
Oh, that's a bit posh.
Yes, it is. A bit.
Bit posh.
One of us.
Yeah.
I
I didn't go there.
yeah.
You went
look,
to
I
Pembroke.
went.
You went to
Pembroke.
Pembroke instead.
I went to public school.
Yeah.
You know, and look, I always say to public school kids, don't let it hold you back.
Yeah.
'Cause
What?
I think there's a bit. Some people think you've got to go to a private school to get ahead. Not at all. I'm the opposition leader. I went to public school.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't,
very
we don't,
true.
we don't care about. I mean, school is an interesting conversation, but we really don't care. Like, I got friends from. Some friends dropped out of school. Some friends, have 2 degrees. Like, if someone's intelligent enough to hold good
So
conversation.
there's a real place for public. Well, there's a critical place for public education, but we've got a pretty good system overall.
Yeah, definitely. I know a few people from Adelaide High. So.
Okay, so question. As like a...
I'm loving interviewing
just
on.
Hey, he's great, isn't he?
He's had enough of it.
As-
What are you doing now? Are you studying?
Yeah, I'm studying a Bachelor of Commerce at Adelaide Uni.
Okay,
And majoring in marketing and accounting.
nice. Bright
Yes.
future.
Oh, let's hope so.
Anyway, I'm done with
I don't
that.
lose my money on the stocks, but yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, you'll be right. You're good at it. Okay, so as like coming across here, so you're like an immigrant, yeah, that's technical.
Yeah, little
like,
Scottish boy.
yep.
Hello, Australia.
What do you
I'm
think
David.
about-
That's what I always liked, day one. Hello.
The Batman origin
Tried
story.
to say good day, but
Yeah,
it didn't
yeah.
sound right, so I never did it again.
fair. What do you think about, or what do you think the solutions are? Because our audio engineer that is not here this evening is Bjor Gru, and he is a poet, journalist, and like an activist. And right now he's in Darwin as a guest speaker at a school to speak on his journey of a refugee, because he came across here at the age of 5 as an unaccompanied minor, and essentially speaks on the identity crisis going on in the African community that has come across. So has that come on your table? Do you know much about?
Don't know anything about that at all. No.
So you haven't met Bior yet?
No.
You've got to meet Bior.
Yeah, you gotta
So
be.
where's he from?
So he's from South Sudan.
I've got a bit of story about South Sudan. I've not been there, but I've been right to the border
Oh, real?
in Uganda. So Uganda's south of South Sudan, and I've looked over into it. One of the most isolated parts of the world. 2009, I went there when I travelled through Africa.
Wow.
There you go.
Pretty cool. It was a fresh new country. Still a lot of civil war around. Yeah.
Why were you there?
Incredible trip. Went there on a sort of volunteer project to work in a building initiative over there. It's good. I've been over there twice. Haven't been since 2009, but yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So
I'd love
what's
to
his
go
name? Bjor?
there. Dior.
How do you spell
Like
that?
Dior, but B with a B.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah.
That's a good way of saying it as well.
Yeah, so he's awesome. And he's coming out with his second book of poetry called Divinity. And he has such a good way of writing. You'd dig it. But essentially, what he has said is that there's an identity crisis going on in the African community where you have like your parents that are first generation.
Yep.
And they want their children to hold the exact same values and traditions of how to go about life. And then the second generation is like assimilating to the Australian culture and is living the way that they want to be like Australian. And there's this conflict, and also there's a lot of single families that have come across, like single parent families that have come across. Kids are left to their own devices.
Lack of stability. Yeah.
And it's led to like at the worst the gang orientated violence and stuff like that.
I don't know much about it at all.
Yeah, and it's said to be like it's an interesting, complex issue because there's a lot of politics between countries, is what I've been told, of African countries, but they're all over here
that would be right.
in the same position at the same time.
Where they wouldn't cross paths on the African continent. Doesn't surprise me because that's one of the challenges of multiculturalism and trying to provide people with the support to appropriately, build new lives here. There's a lot of trauma as well. You're not coming here from South Sudan if life's been really great over there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's an interesting, like, really complex, just human issue to deal with, like, as a country or even as a state of, like, how do we go about, like, having effective multiculturalism and assimilation and empowering people that aren't from places that have facilitated that empowerment.
100%.
Yeah. So it's wild stuff. But where else have you travelled around the world?
I've not travelled hugely. I've been to parts of the States because my brother lives over there. I've been to... Where have I been to? Not travelled through Europe at all. Because when I go back to Europe, I just go to Scotland. Go and see family, go and take those snap streaks in person. Where have I been? Been to Africa, been to South Africa, been to Zimbabwe, been to Uganda, been to the border of South Sudan, been to... Yeah, I haven't travelled much.
What was Zimbabwe like?
Zimbabwe was a really sad country because Zimbabwe has been quite a developed country, but it's slipped back because of serious corruption under Mugabe. So it was a country that had, when it was looked, I won't go as far as saying
I've been to Zimbabwe.
Colonized, because it wasn't colonized in the same way as some countries, but it had a lot of money there. Very fertile country. The UK invested in it and had a big stake there. When they pulled out, corruption set in some years later, and it all fell apart on them. And so that's a country that has been up here, but it's slipped
Yeah.
And you could see that old, like it once had modern infrastructure, but it's fallen back. I saw big sports stadiums that had fallen into disrepair there. That was a sad place.
COVID's devastated Zimbabwe.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
Yeah, yeah. They had to. There was it was world news about 4 or 5 months back about them reintroducing lockdown, stuff like that.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's rough.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that kind of stuff, all the supply chains for like solving world hunger and stuff is supposed to be going back like 20, 30 years of improvement.
That doesn't surprise me.
It's a big
Those will
one.
be the unseen impacts. And of course, some Western countries will feel the need to cut back on their humanitarian aid programs as they get their own economies back in order. And that's going to be problematic as well.
Yeah, and then we also got like growing tension with China, so it's going to like
Big issues here.
be an issue with our country.
Yeah. Yeah, China. Our relationship with China is critical and no doubt problematic. Now, new Labour government appear to be reaching out, trying to repair that relationship. Well, let's hope so, because that's a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, what is kind of like the line that you think should be taken in that in terms of not being stepped over by another country or becoming like puppeted by another country?
Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that. You got to fight for your sovereignty and secure that, of course. But they're a major trading partner as well. So I mentioned the wine industry way back at the beginning of this conversation, and they are hurting real bad because China's brought in these major restrictions on the import of Australian wine. Some wineries, it was a massive part. Not all wineries, but some wineries, a massive part of their sales.
Yeah.
And they've just been decimated, you know. So look, the relationship with China is tricky. You got these relationships have to be two ways. They got to be respectful. You can't have cyber attacks and undermining of Australia's sovereignty. But at the same time, you know, we've got to have a productive relationship there.
Do you have to deal with much defense-orientated stuff?
Not at all. States got no foreign affairs or defence matters at all.
Okay.
So, which is probably quite a relief.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty intense like part of like...
It's a significant part of federal politics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason why like federal governments were created in the beginning, right? Is to say, okay, we're all here. We don't want to be invaded by another person's.
Keep you safe.
Let's keep us safe.
Yeah.
It's like the fundamental reason of any empire, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty uneasy about that particular issue with the new government. I think that's not a great area. We're not in a good time in Australia, like from how China's been behaving, and then Ukraine and stuff like that. Like, it's definitely a precarious time in Australia's history at the moment from a national defence standpoint.
But it's a precarious time in global history.
Yeah.
I think there's more uncertainty than... We've had incredibly peaceful times for 40, 50 years, really. Well, certainly since the end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Well, it's been about 80 years since the World War II.
World War II, but then we had conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and the Cold War. And Cold War, I suspect, you know, the Cold War was coming to an end in my very early childhood, but that was a very scary time in terms of... you know, missiles in Russia, missiles in the US, massively simplifying this, obviously, but and the possibility of mutual destruction. You know, that was presumably a very scary time.
Vietnam.
Supposedly, we're not in that position anymore as a world. Supposedly, with hypersonic missiles, they're so fast and they can change direction in the air that it's not mutually assured destruction because they can get there within 2 minutes. So you need to be able to like sort everything out within 2 minutes and fire back. So it's like it's no longer like 3 or 4 hours. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast about it, and I was just like, "Oh my god!"
Must be true then.
Yeah, it's a fucking...
No, well, it was with this guy.
Fact check.
I mean, look, it was with this guy that is like he's like an ex-CIA or one of those American covert peoples or
Embassies.
his name's Mike something. He was on Joe Rogan. Anyway, it was good, but yeah, that's pretty wild stuff. That if that's the case, that we don't have mutually assured destruction, like what does it mean in terms of geopolitically holding on to each other? Yeah, the
Depends
time.
who
How
has
you
those
tracking for
missiles,
time, by
I
the way?
I'm probably at the upper limit of my time.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, quickly just before you go.
Yep.
Nuclear power. You fan? Not a fan.
I am very interested in seeing where that will go in the future. The idea of building a nuclear power station here is completely infeasible because of this. So at the scale of what you see in the UK and US, parts of Europe, etc. They're huge. They're massively expensive. It's just not going to happen here. But
How much does it cost? Just out of
billions and billions
yeah.
and
And also a lot of time as well.
and 25 years. The UK, well, look, it's decades potentially. The UK's commissioned a new one a while ago, and it's just costing more and more and more and taking a long, long time. Well, I do think there's a place for a discussion about the future of nuclear energy at a small scale level, and I don't know enough about this, but it's something I think we should be willing to have conversations about. Jay Weatherall, when he was Premier, commissioned a nuclear fuel cycle Royal Commission. It looked at certain opportunities, suggested the time just wasn't right for things. However, advancing technologies might create opportunities for small-scale nuclear reactors. But the security issues...
I saw a company called Okta. I think it's Okta. And it's from Japan, I'm pretty sure. And they've created small nuclear reactors that are great for, like, either small little villages or military bases
and industries
stuff like that.
Things like that. Look, I think there's an opportunity to explore that if and when the technology is there. Many countries will not be able to reach net zero targets without some form of nuclear energy production because of the they don't have the geographical advantages that Australia has in terms of wind and solar and open space. So there may have to be other solutions there.
Yeah,
but
fair.
that work is still to be done.
Okay, is there anything else you want to say before we...
I don't think so. I think we've had an epic
wow.
conversation, which has gone well over 2 hours. So 2.5 hours.
Oh, really?
2 hours and 10 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
2 hours and 10 minutes. So I'm sure
Which hasn't got a clock.
you got a little bit of content there.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Hopefully nothing that'll get me in too much trouble.
Hopefully.
Just those wombat people.
Maybe edit out some of my passion there. But thanks for giving me the opportunity to have a chat. Good to catch up again. Owen, good to meet you. Good luck.
Very good to meet you.
Good luck with the stock market, etc. Take over Victor Harbour one day. And I'll see you all soon.
Done.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And